It's a great idea. Thank you, Bill. Okay, so I've just pressed record, and so I know I just said this, but one more time for the recording. Thank you so much for joining us, Derek. And I'm really looking forward to spending a little time hearing what you have to say and drinking our coffees and teas and being together.
Thanks. Bye.
So, can everybody else please mute your mics? I just hear a conversation in the background.
Yes, Susan, Lisa, she just joined and her mic is off.
Yes, well, welcome to the virtual Dharma Temple. And we're glad everybody could join us, and we're looking forward to Derek's talk. Derek, if there's somewhere where people can send donations or dana for you, please let us know.
Sure, yeah. Donna can go to the Dharma House in Morin Heights, and that's probably the best place to send Donna if that's what people want to do. And I'll provide an address to Lisa, and she can put it in a link. So we're gonna start. Everybody ready? Let's get going. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Compassion, non-clinging awareness, and wisdom. I wanted to start with something that Lisa has said that I think is worth repeating. That is, and I'll just read from what my notes I took when she was talking about it. We are practicing together and trying to pass on what we received from Namgyal Rinpoche and figuring out how to put it out into the world. We're trying to figure out how to talk about Dharma, how to teach Dharma, and how to connect to others who didn't meet Rinpoche. And there are things that in the teaching that maybe we didn't impact us that strongly, but perhaps people we're talking to, our family members, our coworkers need to hear. And so how do we make some kind of authentic contribution to support the teaching that has benefited us? And it was from that, those remarks, I wanted to sort of pass on, because in case people have to leave, I'll say the 3 things that this talk is going to be about, and then you can all go. And then we can just drink coffee and chat. So number 1, what Bill Phelan said that is different about Rinpoche. Number 2, what Rinpoche and Sangye taught about trusting students. And number 3, the story I told last time about 9/11 and Rinpoche's teaching from that. So just to go through them. Bill, who was the first person, some of you know him, he lives in Toronto now. He was the first person to mention Namgyal Rinpoche's name to me. And Bill was also the person who got me into the peace movement and activism And Bill at that time had spent quite a bit of his time traveling the world and meeting teachers, illustrious teachers like Krishnamurti and Ram Dass and a variety of Tibetan Buddhist masters. And the way he framed this was, he said, meeting all these beings, what really struck you was that they had genuine experience of awakening. And they really conveyed that. You really got that experience from them. They had genuine experience of awakening. And you could feel it and you knew it. And it built confidence in you. He said, and then he met Rinpoche. And this was a game changer. It was a whole different thing. Because the predominant feeling with Rinpoche that Bill describes, and I think fits for most of us, is not that you became so convinced, although it was there too, that he had all this awakening experience. It was the interaction that he conveyed that you had all this awakening experience, that he could experience the awakening in you. And this is a different kind of teaching, to see the awakening in others and find and seek out ways to tease them to the surface and allow people to develop faith, saddha, which is confidence. Confidence. It doesn't mean some kind of misplaced wish-fulfilling stuff. It's the confidence in our own awakening. And familiarity, G-O-M, gom, the Tibetan word for meditation, which means familiarization. Kalu Rinpoche translated it even as far as acclimatization. But that feeling that you become familiar with those elements of yourself that are awakening and you're supporting them. And to interact with another being who's regularly seeing that and talking to that part of you is extremely powerful. And it's very different from interacting with other Dharma teachers. And that's the predominant, if you like, I think that's the predominant trait of these beings on this call, the beings who studied with Rinpoche. Our predominant work is seeing the awakening in beings and eliciting that confidence, trying to point to it and help beings see it so that they practice and understand that and work from that part. This is not a big thing about trying to convince people how awakened you are, you know, as a teacher. And the people on this call are all teachers, all helping. It's capturing that ability, turning our attention to how to help people see the awakening that's already present in them. And then how to expand it. What are the other interests and so on. So that's the first thing. And in order to do that, you have to try a lot of things, right? And one of the most helpful things I think I ever heard from Rinpoche was, he said, you have to trust the student. You have to trust the meditator. You can put 10 things on the table in front of them. 9 won't work, but they'll pick the one that will. So trust them to find the thing that works. You don't have to get it right. Just put out all the things that intuitively come forward, interact genuinely with that aspect of them that's awakening, and they'll pick the thing. And you have to trust that you may get it wrong, but the practitioner is going to get it right. They'll find it. I can say 100 stupid things that have nothing to do with anything, and a meditator will fasten on to one thing that's helpful, and it's like, wow, take off with it, right? That's the thing that works. And you've probably had this experience. People come back to you 10, 15 years later and say, remember when you said this thing? And half the time you can't remember, and you may not have even said it. Probably someone else said it, but it doesn't matter. You know, they found the thing and it worked and off they went, right? And it's like, great, you know, and they want to give you credit. It's like, I don't even remember doing that, but that's okay. It helps. So, and they found it. So finding the awakening in beings and allowing them to find the parts that work. And then the third thing, as I said last time when we were gathering, is, and this turns to Lisa's point about there's so many different authentic expressions of how awakening is. And so we, I think the way we discover those is by coming to embrace and integrate all these aspects of the teaching, especially the negative aspects, defilements, mistakes, problems that we have. And that story about 9/11, when we were in retreat and Rinpoche came to tell us, even though we were sealed, that this event had happened in New York. And the turning point in that story, and this is the third thing that I think you should take away from this talk, and then you can leave, is he said, I remember being struck by this. He said, you know, I'm going to meditate. The lamas will meditate, and it won't be enough. The imams, the rabbis, the priests, the lamas, we're all going to meditate, and it won't be enough. Because heaven is more moved by the prayers of one sinner than the prayers of 1,000 saints. And then he turned to us and said, so someone in here has to do some work. I'm assuming there's a sinner in the room. So some of you should do some meditation. And because that's what's going to make a difference, you guys practicing. That's what's really reassuring, because I, perhaps not like many of you on the call, but at least some may feel that we, on the spectrum of sinner and saint, we may be more towards the end of one of those things than the other. It may not be the saintly side. So the sinner side, to think that that actually has benefit, you know, to help, is a question you have to like then challenge yourself with. What does that mean? Like, how do we integrate these difficult parts of our being and these mistakes and errors we make? Chogyam Trungpa often used to joke, and you see this in some of the transcripts of his talks, that his particular lineage, the Trungpa lineage, was known as the mishap lineage. I've joked to Sangye that some of the things some of us have been through are so cringeworthy that we should be called the cringe lineage. It's like we really put our foot in it, you know, and we really just screw things up. And yet if we look at those things, there is enlightenment in that. And maybe that's the fourth thing. And the fourth thing is review. I don't want to brag or anything, but I mean, I've done meditation retreats with a fair number of teachers from other lineages, people like Thich Nhat Hanh, Dalai Lama, whatever. I don't recall anyone except Rinpoche and the students and teachers in his lineage emphasizing review. Do you? I mean, I actually haven't ever heard another teacher say it. Review. You come to the end of your practice, review, and then share the merit. Review. Maybe they're saying it and I miss it. I miss a lot of stuff, so it's quite likely. But that emphasis on review is really important. That's the part where we get honest about the role that mistakes make in our path. And when you review, you also see how much of the teaching is coming from others, like how much of it is coming from, it's not actually, you didn't actually get it from Rinpoche. I think that you got it because of these other beings that were teaching at the same time, supporting you in the path. one of my favorite parts of the suttas, reading them, is the master of mistakes. And you really have to appreciate him, because without him, the teaching we get is not like this. Ananda, a Buddha's attendant. And the best suttas are the ones where Ananda is so certain he's right. And they always have this phrase in them, because Ananda says some definitive thing to the Buddha. He says, this is the way it is. And they're great suttas. You can find them because there's only a half a dozen of them. And they have this line where the Buddha goes, say not so, Ananda. And you know, oh, he screwed up again. But it's great, because then the thing you get out of it is really helpful. So one of the classic expressions of this is where Ananda says to the Buddha, oh, Tathagata, Kalyanamitta, spiritual friends, all of us here, they're half of the path, 50% of the path, at least 50% is Kalyanamitta. And then boom, here comes the Buddha. Say not so, Ananda, right? Kalyanamitta are the whole of the path. They're the whole of the spiritual path. It's those kickers that come in. And you get those yourself. We get them when we practice and do review, because then we go through and go, oh, that was what I learned. And since we're all smiling and laughing, let me carry on the positive and uplifting and joyous tone of this talk and talk about the night Rinpoche died. Because I was at Rob and Karen's house, and Karen and her mother and I had gone out to see Cavalia, the horse show. And we came back and got the call from Switzerland. And because I was still doing travel agent stuff, kicked into mode about that. And about an hour later, Rob came home. And Karen met him in the vestibule of the house there in Zephyr. And I was in the kitchen, and she told Rob, and I'm sorry, I'm going to tell this story, and we can erase this from the recording. But this is true to me, and I want to talk about what the teaching is for me in this. Rob expressed something in that moment. He made a sound that I couldn't make. It was a sound of anguish and loss. And I felt so terrible that I couldn't express that I didn't have something that felt like that I could say. But I've reviewed that moment. I review it and review that feeling. And thanks to Rob and his teaching, and especially his teaching in recent years about death and dying and about anatta, he's never said this explicitly, but I understand this now. I don't have to express it. It's part of me because Rob expressed it. I may not get it right, but Rob got it right. And because there's a group, I'm part of that. I don't have to do all this teaching right. Somebody in this group will do this part right, and then it'll all be right, right? And I only know that because of review and also struggling with my own feeling of lack of self-worth, that I couldn't express that I didn't have. There's something wrong or ungenuine or untrue about that moment, that night, that wasn't, I wasn't enlightened enough or full enough or in touch with my feelings enough. But now I know this happened this way, and this teaches me this way, because that is me. Rob is what I couldn't do, but that's okay. He did it. That's part of this great expression. Coming to the teaching, or that feeling of that teaching and seeing it, I can now better integrate the end of that night, which was I fell asleep and I had a dream. And in the dream, a very vivid and strong dream, I was walking down the stairs at Union Station in Toronto to the subway platform underground. And there on the subway platform are two subway trains, and they're going opposite directions. And one subway train is full of people. It's packed like those trains you see at rush hour. And the other train going this way is empty. And when I look at the trains, I can see the label on the front of the train, and its destination says Auschwitz, the death camp. That's the one that's full. And the doors are open, and standing in the doorway is Namgyal Rinpoche. And he's wearing a beret, and he's got camouflage pants, like in the military, and a plain shirt. And he's grabbing people off of this train, and he's throwing them into the empty train. And I'm looking at him, and he turns to look at me. And in the tone and expression we all came to know so well of love and kindness and joy, he screams at me, "What are you doing? Get over here and help." And so I come over and I start grabbing people and throwing them with him. And then he looks at me again with all that beautiful tone of approval and that facial expression that was so lovely. And he frowns and goes, "This would go a lot faster if you wore a uniform." And then I wake up. And that's the feeling of what our work is. We're like spiritual paramedics, you know, and there's a certain lack of civility sometimes to the way Rinpoche interacted with us. It wasn't all sweetness and light. And if we had the right type of people around us who were teaching and helping us, we could understand what some of these lessons were. And sometimes if we didn't, it takes a lot longer of review and talking it over with spiritual friends till you understand what the lesson was that was being imparted. And there are many people in the teaching who help us understand these teachings, because when we get involved, it's like you find yourself saying, "I don't speak enlightenment. Can someone translate that?" You know, like there's these things and they keep going over your head. You know, you don't get it. If you don't have someone to help you, you don't get it, you know? And probably the best example of that is when I was working as a travel agent, and how I got to be doing the travel agent stuff. Some of you know is Sangye had told me, keep an ear out for this phrase. If you hear Rinpoche say this, turn all your attention and try and do whatever he's saying, because it's the most important phrase. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And he said, it would be compassionate if a student did such and such. Okay, no problem. Got it. So we're at Toronto. There's a class in one of those buildings. I remember it has an elevator, and I'm standing by the elevator. Class is over. Rinpoche gave a class. Sangye comes running out. Did you hear it? What? He said the phrase. I'm like, what phrase? He said that it would be compassionate if. I said, he didn't. Yes, he did. Didn't you hear him? No. He said, right now, go back in and talk to him. I said, about what? And he said it would be compassionate if a student helped with travel. I didn't hear that. He says, doesn't matter. Go in there and say you'll help. I was like, I don't want to do travel. And so he said, get in there and go do it. It's the most important thing. Go in. It's like, I don't even know how to. He says, go, 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 go. So I run in. I said, sir, did you, have something? You said something. He said, yes, Sheila Dharmadina is not able to do it anymore. And so I'm looking for someone who could, maybe. And so, if I said, okay, so I take over doing travel after that, because of that thing. I wouldn't have done it otherwise. But the most important phrase is not something that I heard. It's like you get told these key things and then you miss them. And if you don't have friends or someone to push you or tell you, you miss it, right? And then we do the academy, and Rinpoche announces that as a kind of a thing to conclude, or a present, he's going to do an Abhidhamma boat for people who want to do it at the end, after the academy finishes, right? And he says, and I'm doing travel stuff. So he says, come on over to the house, call the company in Germany, get the information, and start the clipboard and the list of people who can go. So I do that. I go to the house, make the list. He says, it's very limited. There's usually only between 12 and 20 spaces on these boats, these freighters. And we're looking at a freighter from Germany to Brazil, and he's going to teach Abhidhamma. And this is a big deal. Like everybody's, wow, get to. And so he says, so make a list up of people who want to go, and give it to me. And we'll see, who we can get on the boat. So I make a list, and he looks at the list and he says, okay, wait a second. And wait a second. Why is your name on here? I said, well, I'm in the academy. He says, it doesn't matter. You don't have a mind suitable for Abhidhamma. He says, you're not going to understand this. He says, what about your partner? Anne, she does math. She's very kind of methodical. She's much better. Put her name on here. You're not going on this trip. What? I got to organize this? And I'm not. He says, nope. And by the way, this name here, which happens to be one of my best friends, he goes, this person, they're not going on the trip either. He takes the marker and crosses their name off. I'm like, that's not fair. That's not right. And he goes, that's the way it goes. Make a list up, tell people, and let's get started getting deposits. So I go back to the center, run up to the Tara cabin where Senge and Chimmy are staying. And I say, well, look at the list, and I don't get to go. And Senge, because again, here's the point. You may not speak enlightenment, and there's something going on, and you don't get it, and you need a translator. So Senge translates. He says, well, how do you feel? I said, pissed off. He said, right. Now, can you imagine Rinpoche saying that to you and you not being pissed off? I'm like, nope. He said, well, maybe you should try. Like, if Rinpoche can keep throwing stones in the pond and making ripples, and he's going to keep doing it. If he throws a stone in and there's no ripple, then maybe you get to go on the trip. I'm like, oh, okay. So prepared, I do some meditation, get the list confirmed. We get our first deposits. Rinpoche says one of his things, again, because as Terry would know, and the others who were there at the time, he made a discipline about making sure if I was within earshot. He didn't actually say my name. He would say, what's his name? I said, what's his name? Get him over here and help with the travel stuff. So I came over and went to the house, show the list, and he looks, he says, okay. And then he goes down and he looks at me, and I'm doing my equanimity meditation. Calm, calm. And he goes, why isn't your name on here? You're in the academy. Shouldn't you go on this trip? And I'm like, calm. It's up to you, sir. Calm. And he goes, right. Well, put your name on there. Right. Okay, well, that's good. You can head back to the center now. I'm like, on second thought, take your name off. Yeah, I've thought of someone else who should go on the list. And he crosses me off again. And I'm like, I go back. That went on like 6 times. And then finally, I went to the thing and he said, you're going? And I was like, yep. He said, you're not going? I was like, okay. And then he went and said, okay, you're going. In the end, as everyone knows, the takeaway is we changed the whole trip. The boat got canceled and we ended up doing this whole thing in Australia instead and in Perth. Point being, without someone to help me understand what was going on, it just felt like a vindictive, petty interaction. And I didn't understand what was actually happening there. And so, and this isn't to say as a teacher, we should be petty and vindictive. That's not going to help people, right? It's how do we interpret events in a way that allow the person to unfold. In the immortal words of the great Zen teacher, the boxer Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. And basically life is continually punching us in the face, right? And so on the last time I saw Rinpoche to drive him to the airport before he flew over to Europe, I remember pulling into the driveway with the rental car, and Terry was doing something still with the bags. So Rinpoche came out first, and he came and sat in the car, and he had a letter. And the one thing, at least with me, Rinpoche was perfect, was that he always was very careful about protecting the identity of students. He would tell me stories, but I never knew the name of the person. He was very good with confidentiality. He said he had a letter and a student, and the student wanted to know whether they should go into the order or should have this romantic affair, you know, as if there was this split in the road, 2 things they could do. And Rinpoche said, you know what they're really asking me? He says, I can't tell them the answer to that. And he goes, actually, you know, I could tell them the answer to that. I'm not going to, but I could. He says, but what they're really asking me is, which path is free of suffering? You know, which one is going to be the one that doesn't have suffering in it? That's what they want to know. And he said, and that's not what the Dharma is for. The Dharma doesn't free you from, it's not about having a path that has no suffering. The Dharma is how you deal with suffering. It's the answer to being punched in the face. It's how you deal with suffering. And the other takeaway I would have from these making mistakes and getting things wrong in the teaching is the helpful aspect of a review is you see how Rinpoche was constantly trying, and this is something we can do, to encourage people that they don't have to know everything. That you don't have to know all the teaching. You just have to find a part of it that appeals to you, that you're interested in, and where you can study and make some kind of contribution. And the really encouraging thing is with the defilements, and this is again different than other teachers. He said, you don't have to conquer them all. You just have to figure out which is the one that's the biggest. There's one big boulder in the river that blocks, and then there's a lot of smaller ones. So what's the biggest thing that you have to focus on? The biggest, the main one. And for those of you who remember or might have been there when this happened, when we were in the academy, he was very clear. Greed, hatred, delusion, one of these is the paramount thing you have to overcome. And if you were there on that fateful day, in the early days of the academy, you remember the time, because you may not appreciate this, but for those of us who got to go to the academy, we were a privileged elite and so much better than everybody else and extremely important. And if people didn't know that, we tried to let them know that by going in and putting our possessions on the chairs or cushions at the front. So we always got to sit in the front and closest to Rinpoche and, you know, be where the important people got to be. Of course, that also puts you right in the line of fire. But anyway, we would be in the front and it was the best place to be, right? Except on this day, when in a room of like 40 or 50 people, there's the row of whatever it is, 12 academy people at the front, right? And a couple of others. And Rinpoche says, all right, I talked about, you know, what's the principal type you are that you have to overcome. All right, academy, stand up. All right, tell me, what type are you first? And he goes down the row. Marcia, Wendy, Verity, Grace, Lynn, Marcus. And he goes down the row, right? And as each person says it, he goes, right, sit down, right? And he goes to the next person, right, sit down, right? And I'm thinking, I don't know what type. I didn't think he was going to test us on this. I'm not. And I'm going through the types and what he's told us so I can quickly make an assessment. You know, okay, well, there's like like greed. I think greed has like messy bedrooms, or I was like, they make a lot of mess, I think. I must be, you know, greed. But I'm not sure. Actually, you know, I'm kind of all three. So I'm thinking, okay, that's my answer. I'm kind of all three. And then he gets to Rob. And Rob goes, well, sir, there's parts of all three. And Rinpoche goes, no. You're one, cut it out, get out. And he sends him out of the temple. He says, get out. And Rob's like, stomps off to the back of the temple and goes out the door, right? And Rinpoche says to me, or he goes along the road next, I'm like the row. I'm like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. He's coming to me. And he says, gets to the next person, right, sit down. He gets to me and I'm going, okay, I can't say the all three ones. So I'm going to, okay, greed. And he goes, no, keep standing. Next one. And he goes along and it's like, shit. And I'm trying to think. And now I'm so confused. I'm so confused. And then I realize, oh, confusion. That's the ignorant one. Okay, so he goes back around. He gets to me again. And he goes, finally, you know what you are? And I go, ignorant. And he goes, no. And I go, I know what it is. I know what it is. He goes, shut up, sit down, sit down. Made it easy for you. Of course, sit down. And he says, someone go to the door and open it. And I open the door and Rinpoche sweetly says, Rob, do you know what kind you are? Rob comes in and goes, hey. And Rinpoche goes, yes, come in, please, join us, right? Rinpoche comes in, joins us. Or Rob comes in, joins us. That's how we figured it out. At least in my case, I got them all wrong. All wrong. So that's why you should have some caution about the courage of your convictions when you're certain you know what's right. And it's those kinds of turning points where you realize, okay, I'm just going to bear down on this one thing, right? Okay, if it's hatred, that's what it is. The antidote is loving kindness. Fine. First retreat Rinpoche announces, which is the first long retreat the Academy has booked. We started in September, first year of the Academy. April is the first long retreat we're all going to have to do. And it's going to be on the Brahma viharas, which I've looked up and I understand have something to do with love. So this is a good antidote to hatred. So that's what I'm going to focus on. However, I'm terrified of doing a 2-week retreat. I'm a terrible meditator. I have no discipline. And for the first 2 years of my practice, I keep falling over on my back every time and I can never sit upright. I keep falling over. And all I can think is having to be locked up for 2 weeks is going to be terrible, and not being able to talk and be in silence. And I've never done a 2-week retreat before in silence and all this. And you can see it coming on the calendar, right? As it comes towards you, you're like, we're going to have to do this thing. And I really don't want to do it. And then we get to the day and Rinpoche announces, and he's so methodical. The other thing is, you know, he says, okay, we'll do 3 days on this, on the first one, 3 days on the second. There's 4 of them. So we'll just do 3 days on each, right? And he starts. And if you haven't had this experience, almost everybody must have on this call. of what it's like at the Dharma Centre to be on a retreat focused on loving kindness. And people are relatively new, like I was, to the path, to the studies. You're not sure what to do with your eyes. As you pass people on the path, you're never sure. You shouldn't, are you supposed to look at them? No, you shouldn't. Don't nod, don't say hi, don't, no, okay. But it's more than that, because as you go into retreat and you do, first he teaches loving kindness for 3 days, then compassion for 3 days. And by the time we're down to day 9, right, we're end of mudita, sympathetic joy. And I haven't got a single loving thought or feeling in my body, and I can't do any of this practice, and it's all stupid. And as you probably know, as Tarchin has said, the first thing you do when you fail at a meditation or have a problem is you blame the teacher and you forget the instructions. And I completely, that 100% agree. That's what you do. Blame the teacher, forget the instructions. Teacher's stupid, stuff doesn't work. Okay. So I'm at day 9 and I'm walking on the path, and every person coming from the bathhouse, and the saintliness is dripping off of people. I mean, people are walking by you and their gaze is down and they're already full arhats, and you're just seeing person after person go by you, composed and utterly beatific, right? And you're in this state of like churning, you know, and as you see someone coming, you have to kind of hide it and go into your beatific state, you know? You know, which is, yes, I'm loving and compassionate like you are. And then you pass them and you go back to your cabin and you can't practice. At least this is me. And everything is terrible and horrible and nothing works. And the teacher's stupid and all the people on the property are stupid and it's all crap. And at the transom of the window in the temple, I was in one of the basement rooms of the temple, Scratch's princess, the black lab that lived at the Fleury's house, and Anne and I had been over there house sitting the house many times and become close to Princess. How this happened, I don't know. Princess found my room and my transom and scratched on my transom. And I was cross-legged downstairs, basement of the temple, practicing, as you guys very know well, because you've probably seen me in this state, in a state of strong attempt to do loving kindness. I'm practicing like this, and I can hear this scratching. And of course, your first thought, if you're cultivating loving kindness, when you hear another being in need like that, an animal, is get lost. I'm practicing loving kindness. Go away. You're interrupting my practice of loving kindness. Piss off. I'm practicing loving kindness. Of course, none of that worked. And I realized I was going to have to drop my practice and go out and deal with this dog. So I say this is useless. I'm wasting my time. Go out, take the princess for a walk over towards log cabin in that area where all the trees are really spaced out and the moss is really nice, you know. I take princess there, sit down in frustration and let princess do her thing. And she runs around that area of the forest and she trees a whole bunch of chipmunks. You know what I mean? She chases them up the trees and she's just ecstatic, you know, because she's so successful. She's treed every chipmunk in the forest. They're all up chattering at her. There's all this noise, you know, and she comes over, she puts her head in my lap, you know, and the tongue hanging out, and she's so proud of herself. She's just in this lovely state, and it's impossible not to feel her joy, right? That she's of accomplishment. She's accomplished so much. And I realize this is the feeling of joy of another's accomplishment. This is mudita. This is the joy of another's joy. And on review, I realize this feeling had been there, but I had resisted it because the instructions I'd been given were very specific and I was very rigidly adhering to them. And this is where you have to be careful and you have to trust the student to do it right, not the teacher to get it right. Because Rinpoche had clearly said, please don't strike me dead, sir. But he had said, you can't give what you haven't got So you have to find it inside first. That's how you generate these Brahma viharas. And you should share them with beings, but he hadn't by that point expressed anything about practicing with animals. And I felt like, and he also said, you have to do it in order. And I hadn't been able to get love and compassion first. And it felt like the first one that really hit me was joy. And it came from the outside in, and it came from a dog, not a person. All of these things, to me, I resisted up until that point because they were contrary to his instruction. They felt like I was doing it wrong, and I couldn't do it that way. So when they came up, I would push them away. Later that year, Rinpoche said the two aspects of a student he values most are flexibility of mind and compassion. You have to be flexible. And sometimes even the most revered teacher in your life, you may find yourself at odds with them or feel like the instruction you're taking is counter to what they said. But you have to go when the feelings are that strong and the practice works. You have to go with that. That's what works. That's how the teaching is. It may not start with loving kindness. It might start with mudita. It might come from the outside in. You might not feel it from the inside out to start with. That's okay. So those are the two main stories I wanted to tell about making mistakes. And confidence, and the confidence that comes when people encourage us and support us and help us understand the Dharma, because we don't, many times at least, I don't get it on first take. It doesn't get in on first take. Let me add one more, because this is about something called the teaching on one page. Many people have this copy of this teaching on one page that we've, a group of people in New Zealand and elsewhere helped refine and put together. It's just a list for key aspects of the Dharma. But the reason and the person we have to credit for its creation is a person I'm not actually going to name, but back in the mid-90s, there was a program at the Dharma Centre for resident meditators. And one winter, there was a vacancy, and in desperation, I think they'd run through a long list and no one was going to go to the property. And so they finally came down to the bottom of the list and asked me if I'd go to the center and be a resident meditator there. And I had some practice to do. So I went and did a Chenrezig retreat compassion practice. And the center was empty. And I was in a pyramid cabin. And I'm partway through the retreat, doing as you do, practicing in pyramid cabin, doing my Chenrezig, practice compassion for all beings. And all of a sudden you hear in the snow, the footsteps come up and someone comes to the door and boom, boom, boom. Of course, as we all do, when you're deeply embedded in compassion meditation, your first thought is, who the hell is that? Why are they interrupting my meditation? Why don't they go away? Don't they know I'm a resident meditator? It's like, they shouldn't come and bother me. I'm practicing for the benefit. Like, no one's supposed to be here. Go away. Of course, you get up, go to the door, and there's a person there. And they have they tell you the story that they have the opportunity to travel with Rinpoche around the world for a year. And, but Rinpoche had said that since they're relatively new to the teaching, they had to understand the basic vocabulary of the Dharma. And I'm like, okay. And so someone has to help them understand it. And when they asked, the only person available who could run through it, only person around was at the center. Who was at the center at that time happened to be me. So they came over and this person sits across from me and unrolls this like blueprint paper, you know, those thin sort of like onion skin paper, and it unrolls this huge roll of it. And on it is scribbled all of these Dharma terms, like in like tiny little bird scrawl with arrows, and it's an absolute mess. I can't figure, I'm looking at it going, what? And holy cow. And the person looks at me and says, and I have to, let me preface this by saying, I missed the kind of the intro to this, which is, I had been given this robe material. Many of us were. There was a group of people who were given Lama couple ordination with Rinpoche, and he gave us robe material, and he cut up a robe of his own. And so there's this square, and said, you know, make your own robes. It's the tradition is you sew your own robe. And at the time when I was on this retreat, this robe material was in the trunk of my car, hadn't been sewn. And Senge had said, you never wear a robe for yourself. You wear it because someone needs to see it, and because it's essential. And so this robe material was sitting in a plastic bag with this piece for like 4 years in the trunk of my car. And when this person sat across and unrolled this thing, and then they had this emotional release and like burden, that they said, if you don't help me, if I don't understand this, I don't get to go with Rinpoche. I don't get to travel. He won't let me go on this trip. So you have to help me. I'm like, okay, come back tomorrow, 3 o'clock, we'll start. The person says, thank you. And they walk to the door, turn at the door of Pyramid Cabin and say, where's your, they pull out money. Where's your Dana bowl? I said, I'm in this state that some of you may have experienced of conflict about Dana and whether you should accept it. And I work for money anyway, and I don't really think, but Rinpoche has taught Dana is not about you. It's about the need of the person to give. Of course, I've been oblivious to that teaching up until this point. This person turns and says, you need to have a Dana bowl, and takes my toque, turns it upside down, puts the money in and says, when I come back tomorrow, you have a Dana bowl. And I look at the person, I'm like, what? He says, don't you care about anybody else? This is for me. I need a Dana bowl when I come to see you. You have a Dana bowl next time I come. Wow. Okay. And they leave. And once I'm sure they're out of earshot and they've left the property, I can hear their car start and leave. I run over to my car, back to the main house, get the sewing machine out in the dining room and sew this robe. And when they come back at 3 o'clock the next day, that's the first time I wear this robe. It's for that person. That's why we wear this thing. And that page that we made, that became the teaching on one page. That was the basis of a teaching we did in New Zealand for several months. It's all because of that person. We can talk about how great our teachers are, but we have to remember these instances that produce the teaching that is. And that's what I'm trying to say here. It's these beings are the teaching, right? It's not Rinpoche that made that, you know what I mean? That's not him, that's that person, that particular person made that happen. And taught me about, I've had the seeds planted, but they're the one who brought about the fruition of understanding about why you need to have a Dana bowl. So that's it. That was all I was going to say. As you can see, I think that the key thing that is important is to review these events, because you can, my first looking back, my first naive review of that, when I was at the center as the resident meditator, I generally only have a rose-colored glasses view of these events. Do you know what I mean? You look at your teaching, the retreat you did, and you tend to see it in a certain way. Oh, I did all this good work and all these good. I need to review honestly and go, actually, I was in a pretty crappy state. I was pretty resentful. I was kind of self-centered and resentful and bitter and unhappy. And that's actually an aspect of kind of the juice of the moment that made that teaching work and that interaction with that. I'm not advocating being resentful and bitter, please. But I'm saying I have to be honest, like I was in a conflicted state and the teaching unfolded because I can look and see it was the conflict and resolution of these things. It wasn't some kind of saintly act. It wasn't like I was in some kind of great beatific state, you know? And that's, for me, this is the takeaway, is to review and see the role of these pushes and pulls that help us on the path. And the key is to recognize spiritual friends are the whole of the spiritual path. These are the aspects, and all these beings, our interactions with them are unfolding the teaching we do, you know, and that unfolds us. That's it. Any questions, arguments, criticisms, go to Lisa. Complaints, go to Karen. And other stuff can come to me. Cheers.
Can I ask a question? In the spirit of review, do you think maybe you did actually do the Brahma Viharas in order with Princess because you made friends, then you were compassionate because she came to your door and needed something from you, and you got up and helped, and then you did mudita. So do you think perhaps maybe it was in order after all?
Do you think you would have thought of that if I hadn't taught it the wrong way I did just now?
No, probably not.
It's really important to say things wrong sometimes for the benefit of others. And to challenge, to say it, maybe say it the wrong way and let them get it right. You don't have to get it right. Just say it. Do the wrong thing and then see how someone else interprets it, you know, as long as the motivation is good. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Especially if the wrongness is, you're keeping it to yourself, you know, you're saying, oh, I made this mistake, I did this thing wrong. Then let other people, how they take away from it, fine. Any other?
I have a comment. It's Eleanor from Ottawa. Hi. Bill and I came into this community when we moved to Ottawa in 2011, 2012, and never met Rinpoche. So it was all hearing about him and his teachings and so on through all, you know, many students, which has been really wonderful. And I've also regretted not meeting him in person, but I was on a different trajectory at that time in my life. So you've made him also come more alive, and this is very helpful. I'm very grateful to you.
Thanks, Eleanor.
Okay.
This is Bill. I'm a partner to Eleanor.
Hey, Bill.
Thank you for your spontaneity and the beauty of your presentation. You're very physical when you talk, and that's that's lovely. That's just lovely. I had the good fortune of organizing the records and the documents at the Dharma Centre, I think back in perhaps the winter of 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see a thread of how the Dharma Centre evolved from Toronto and back and forth, depending on Rinpoche's whim.
Mm-hmm.
Two revealing, or at least one revealing thing to me was collecting the photographs of Rinpoche.
Mm-hmm.
And they say a lot about what he was or who he was at any one particular time, which only made the whole thing poignant to me. Because in those photographs, you could tell, even when he got his recognition from the Karmapa, a lot of feeling was going on, a lot of expression and so forth. And it just enhanced my, like Eleanor says, we never met Rinpoche. And here we are in the lineage, meeting all these people. And it turns out that between the fall of 2011 and the following fall, we met all the teachers who frequent the Ottawa scene. It was like one after another. And it was quite a introduction, if you will. And I'm still sorting what to do with it all, which you can appreciate. The idea of review by now has been so established in the shared sadhanas that we have, some more than others, that I find that it's very difficult at times to do the review. So for me,
yeah,
it still is a very major learning experience. And this is regardless of what it is that has triggered me. Presently, it's eclipses and what's going on in the heavens and all that sort of thing. I find it, I'm sensitive to a lot of that stuff. And it really just drives me. And it's very difficult at times to deal with that. So it's another way of review. It brings these things up, which I don't ordinarily think about, even though I may feel them. So I just wish to say how much I appreciate that phase that he, as you say, put such emphasis on. And for that, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Derek, I'm wondering if I could make a comment and ask a question. So the story that you shared today about wearing your robe, and maybe this teaching or lesson came up for you different times. I remember you telling me the story of Rinpoche talking about this, about standing up or standing out. And you use the paramedic image, you know, that it's compassionate at the scene of an accident when there's chaos or not knowing where to access skills or help, to put that white jacket on. And the even though there may be lack of confidence there, or a lack of self-perceived lack of skill, the compassionate action is to put it on, because it's not about you. It's about others and the compassion for them. And so that has been just very impactful. So when you talk about how these interactions or stories or teachings from Kalyanamitta, our community, I just like to acknowledge that that has been a very powerful story that impacted me at the time that you told me that and talked to me about that. But the seed of that story also has been watered through the years by different circumstances and conditions. And so even though I was not consciously reviewing it, you know, thinking back on that story and how is this applicable now and what do I do with it, it kind of unfolds, in my experience, on its own. You know, once you've had that initial connection or awareness, or I don't know what words, you know, many words you could use, that it kind of takes a life of its own, you know, that if one can stay open to those connections and stories as living Dharma, you know, they just kind of continue to do their own thing, you know. And maybe that's a similar unfolding as sadhana practice is, right? That work is done often getting around all our own stuff that's going on. It's being seated and unfolded under the consciousness, I guess we could call it the subconscious, in the depths, despite our best efforts to muck it and bumble it and cringe it and all those things. So I first want to acknowledge the impact of that and thank you very much for continuing to share this stories in the unique way that I found that you approach, and, you know, looking at the bumbling or that's my word, but, you know, the ways that we mess up or don't see, or, you know, and how that actually is of benefit to others. So thank you. My question is around sadhana practice. So often, you know, we talk about review in terms of, so it's often used for mindfulness practice, you know, to review the practice as to what was actually come up. Are you suggesting, or was it taught by Rinpoche, that at the end of a sadhana practice, that one actually goes back and reviews? Because if one's had the empowerment with that, you know, and they're working with it, they're appearing as the deity, as opposed to the me that might be reviewing, right? If it's working, whatever working is, right? And so I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I'll just say the way I work with review, at the micro and the macro. And so in a particular practice, the phrase that, and it wasn't used all the time, I'm not trying to say this, but on an occasion or two, the phrase that helped me was review your meditation for anything that stands out. anything strong and impactful from your practice, your sit, that stands out in body, speech, or mind. And that would apply to any of the types of meditation we do. And because around the time we were taught sadhana and Tibetan practices, we were also working with Jung's book, Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious. We were also doing dream work, of which the only dream book that Rinpoche really put emphasis on was Let Your Body Interpret Your Dreams. So the feeling aspects in the body that happen with dreams, with reviewing dreams and the feeling you had. And I apply that in meditation. The strong, tactile, tangible feelings and associations that happen with meditation. And in part, I feel like we're taking a snapshot of our practice so that in the macro way, we come back and review. And we also are putting things in storage for later, allowing them to come up and maybe link up with other practices so that something that's a pattern or common may then repeat or eventually work its way up to the surface of consciousness where we notice something that's happening in our practices. We didn't notice it before, right? And then we see there was this theme that was going through it. But if we don't review and then just let it go, it was really important, Rinpoche would say, review and let it go. Don't try to become a spiritual materialist where we accumulate laurels and show off because we had this or that thing happen. It's notice, drop it. Tarchin's, one of the ways he speaks about it, especially with difficult things that come up, is he would refer to having an anxiety closet. He would say he'd go through, and if something came up that was difficult in meditation and upsetting, you go, okay, you do what all courageous, tough, strong meditators do. You take that difficult, horrible little thing that happened in meditation or dream or whatever, you throw it in the closet, slam the door. Don't deal with it. Close it, slam the door. And when those things accumulate enough and the closet bulges, eventually poof, it blows open and there's something to understand from it, but you don't have to deal with all these things. This is different, by the way, than dredging and Mahamudra and those things, but different times, different approaches. But review is important to accumulate and connect threads. One of the analogies Rinpoche said often was that you have all these numinous experiences in your life that started at conception and even before. And what we're trying to do is connect them up, accumulate them so that we can get the kind of cumulative benefit and the power of them all at once coming together, The other thing I'll say, about, just to come to your first point about the robe, a really important point Rinpoche made, especially I recall it was in the last period of his life. He was talking about making effort to notice people's behavior and to see them and understand them in the Dharma according to what they do, not what they wear, and not what their title is. And the way he put it was, he said, you can go to the base of Mount Everest, and there's a lot of guys walking around with ropes and tackle and mountain climbing gear, trying to convince you they climbed the mountain, and they don't have a clue. They never climbed the mountain. And you should be able to see that and know that. And then there are people walking around who don't have any of the gear on, but when you talk to them and you interrogate them, you realize, oh, this person knows the way to the top of the mountain. And so that's a person I'm going to pay attention to that. And I think that's an important aspect of how we unfold in the teaching, is we notice how many beings have been to the top of the mountain, how many beings have this experience. And that's why some of these stories that I tell are about the ways in which we learn from the beings around us in the teaching, not necessarily from the person who's sitting at the front or wearing the robe or who's on a throne of some kind. It's the teaching is this cumulative effect. And there are many beings who are teaching. I mean, we can say it in a kind of a cliched way. We're learning from everyone, but we've got to look and think, okay, that person knows this is really helpful, and have the ability to recognize that and not only see it or feel like the only thing we're drawn to is people who have the mountain climbing gear. So that's the other aspect too.
Yes, thank you.
I would like to offer my appreciation for Derek sharing his teaching today and experiences with Namgyal Rinpoche. I met Namgyal Rinpoche the year he died. He came to Japan and I was at the retreat hiding in the back, terrified to say hello because I'd already heard of Rinpoche. And the one experience I have with Namgyal Rinpoche, and so I'm so glad to hear you because I have such little experience and I could hardly hear his teaching throughout because I was so scared.
Wow.
And just dull. And so I'm standing in the teaching area and everyone has gone out and Rinpoche is the last one coming to leave. And our only interaction was him looking at me and saying, I'm getting too old to deal with this. And I believe he gave me a blessing. And I've had dreams with him sitting in a truck with Doug Sensei and I, because I study under Doug and Catherine Pawasarat, very able teachers who I have gratitude for all. And thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for the way you said it too, because my willingness to be afraid and hide out has now taught me years later to start to stand in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. It sounds like wisdom to me. Holy smokes. A whole bunch of us would stay in the back row if we could. Yeah. Once you got to know how dangerous it could be, right? Guru means dangerous friend. So it's like, holy cow, you got to be careful, man. That's just a dangerous place to be. You know, the story I didn't tell, which some of you know, is having been there at the 9/11 thing and then stayed in retreat for 6 months, as some of you know. I was in Galaxy Cabin, which is fair ways away if you've been to the property. And so very unusual to have anybody come up the road to Galaxy. And I remember there was snow and I was meditating and I heard footsteps and someone came up to Galaxy, banged on the door. This was towards the end of my retreat. And really urgently, like ran up the snow. You could hear them running and banged on the door and then said, you've got to come right away. And I'm like, I've been in retreat for 6 months, in solitary, basically. You got to come right away. And I'm thinking, okay, like, what's up? You missed an appointment with Rinpoche. He's not happy. You better come. You got to go to the house. And I'm like, what? Appointment? I don't remember an appointment. But like, you're on retreat. There's things that could happen. And maybe you missed a note or something on the board. I don't remember. And they're like, come. We've got the car at the end of out on Galway Road. Come. And so I jump into my snow boots and my jacket and run down the thing. And, I haven't run anywhere in months. And I get in the car and we drive down Galway and up and into Kinmount to Rinpoche's house, and there's the garage. You've got to go through the garage to the side door, and then into the side door of his house, right? So this is the manager who's driven me up there. So they say, go. So I get out of the car and swiftly walk to the door, knock on the door on the side of the house. And this never happened again. This was the only time this ever happened. Door opens and it's not Terry opening the door. It's Rinpoche. I've never had that experience before. Rinpoche opening the door right at the side door of the house. Door opens and it's Rinpoche. And I'm like, sir, I understand I missed an appointment. I'm sorry, I'm here. And he looks at me, he goes, what are you doing here? And I got told, he says, what's the time? I said, it's around 11. So, have you ever come to the house at 11 o'clock before? Don't you know the Lama rests between this time and this time? Don't you care? The Lama has to recharge his batteries. You never come to the house at this time. And you don't come and interrupt the teacher when he's resting. And I'm like, but I don't care what you were told. You know you don't do that. I guess I just understood. Why are you here? I said, well, I understood I missed that. But you're coming at a time you don't normally get right. And you're interrupting the teacher. You don't care about the teacher, do you? That's not, you don't care about other students. If the teacher's tired, he can't teach other students, can he? And I'm like, well, that's not, and it's just listen to yourself making excuses. And so I shut up. And I'm looking and he's going, I can't believe you would do this. And he just starts to tear into me, right? And he's going at me with all how selfish I am, how inconsiderate, I didn't think about him or anybody else. Meanwhile, in the background, like just behind the fireplace, I can barely see Terry's back there. And Terry's pointing at the watch on his arm. And I'm thinking like, I know, he's already told me it's the wrong time. I know, I don't get what this whole, I don't know what I've done here. But anyway, I'm like, okay. And Rinpoche keeps tearing at me and telling me how uncompassionate, inconsiderate, and all this stuff. Failure at meditation, completely failed. And he looks at me and he goes, you know what time it is? And I said, you just told me. He says, no, what's the day? And I said, I don't know, sir. He says, April 1st, April Fools. And I'm looking at him like, what the F? And then he goes, so can you change that mind state in 3 breaths? And I say, honestly, well, it's tough, sir. He goes, well, give it a try. And he just stands with me in the doorway. And he says, you want to come in and have some tea? I'm like, yeah. So I go in and my heart's racing and I'm not going to claim any great equanimity in that moment. But it was a teaching. And the following year, I went into a month's retreat. And there had been a person there. Many of you know her. Is it Sophie? Is that her name? From Sophia from Wales, who was a teacher. Sonia had been a teacher and a karate instructor and all that. She'd been in for a year. And I was in for a month. And someone came running up again to Galaxy, bang on the door. You got to come. You're late for a meeting with Rinpoche. And I look at the date and I think, I know what day it is today. I know what's going on. I come out to the car and Sonia's sitting in the car. And I realize, okay, she doesn't know what's going to happen. So I'll just keep my mouth shut. So the manager drives us to the house. We get out. We get told we have to go right away. The 2 of us walk up to the door. And I was wrong about it being the only time because this happens again. Rinpoche opens the door and he starts tearing into Sonia about interrupting him, coming to the house and doing all this stuff. And I'm behind her. I'm watching it happen going, oh my God. And she's like a bull on a windless day. She's not budging, you know, you're looking for any, and it's just calm. She's not even responding to him. And eventually he's kind of frustrated and he looks at her and he goes, you know what day it is today? She goes, I'm not sure, sir. He says, it's April 1st, April Fools. She goes, I'm not sure. What is that? He goes, April Fools, you know, it's a joke. He says, oh, we don't observe that in Europe. Not really. And Rinpoche's like, what? And he goes, well, can you change that mind state in 3 breaths? And she says, what mind state, sir? I'm looking at her like, what? And he goes, whoa, okay, well, very good. And he kind of raises his eyebrows at me behind, and I'm like, good. He says, you want some tea? And she says, that would be nice. And then we went in and had a cup of tea. That's how I got the benefit of seeing someone in a very, very high state of practice. It was very beneficial. And it gives me something to aim for. So that's good. But it also taught me that the teacher would use what might even feel like cruel means to test you, you know, see if the practice is real, if it really works. Again, when you get punched in the face, you know, when the world does these horrible things and these terrible things are happening, what kind of stability and responsiveness we still have, you know, that isn't just reactive. And I've said this before, but I think it's really important. It comes from the LGBT activist and teacher, Maia Duerr, who is a Zen minister down in the Southwest. And she points out that the words creative and reactive have the same letters in them. It's really important, especially if we, as this type of group is. It's not merely that we let the reactivity relax. That's the Venerable Analayo's definition of mindfulness, is non-reactive awareness of mind. But it's not merely non-reactive, it's allowing it to be transformed into creative, because this was the aspect we encountered in the teaching. It's the creative. It's not merely that it's non-reactive. It's all this variety of response. That's why you are all necessary. You know, as Rinpoche said, when I die, there are going to be 10 or 12 people who will pop up, and each one will say, oh, I'm the true heir of Rinpoche's teaching. Nah, nah, nah. You know, and he was kind of mocking it and saying it like that and said, and they'll all be wrong. Yeah, but maybe together we're all right. And all these different creative expressions of Dharma are necessary. Like, it's not enough to have this teacher or that teacher. We need all the variety that we see here on a call like this. All this difference is necessary. You're going to connect with people in a way that Lisa can't, or I can't, or, you know, it's necessary. So creative. Cheers. This is vodka, by the way. I'm kidding. It's coffee, it's better. So with that, is there any other complaints, criticisms?
Derek, it's Karen.
Hey, Karen.
I just wanted to. I mean, there's so many things you said today. It was really great. Thank you. Just back to what you started at the beginning, or near the beginning at least, about the Buddha saying, Ananda saying, 50% of it is Sangha, and the Buddha saying it's 100% Sangha, because Kalyanamitta, right? I like that term, maybe better than Sangha, because but anyway, you know, the spiritual friends. And every story you told, it was there wasn't the teaching without the whole of the mandala of Kalyanamitta. And I just, you know, it's just so funny because I think I was in the same room in the temple with the same sorts of mind states and an entire retreat of people, and Rinpoche helping to me in a very profound way to process, like, I hate everyone and I hate everything. And you come to some, it bubbles and you see it, you finally see it, but then how did you process it? And without the whole of the mandala people, and you know, he even taught those, I mean, he was such a master of throwing out the many possibilities, like you say, in one-on-one interaction, or in, you know, we did this, the psychodrama work with, again, it's the mandala, everyone's there, part of the conscious, unconscious, the archetypes, or all these models. And all of it is just like this infinite waves of compassion, of being present for beings, and for just compassion, right? It's just unbounded. And so I'm reminded, you know, because you can get kind of stuck in the laundry lists. And I recently heard students asking, why are there so many lists and so many things to do? And then, you know, you can get caught up in kind of mechanistic, but I just really appreciate the living Dharma, the Mahamudra of it, and the constant attention and compassion. So anyway, just thank you. And the reminder about review. And I do recall something what Sharon was saying from, maybe it was from Tarchin, it might be in his puja book, but I'm not sure where, or at the end of some sadhanas where you say, recognizing the imperfections that may still be there, you know, and you did, you know, you determined to continue to practice. So anyway, thank you. All of you, everyone who's been present today and sharing Kalyanamitta. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm going to share one more story just to give credit to Matthew Eads, who doesn't get enough credit. And because each of these beings, you're at the center, and all these beings are helping you, or you're at a retreat in Norway or New Zealand or someplace, and there's all these beings who are helping you. And back in the, when I, just before the academy, actually, in the first academy, I went to the center and happened to arrive when they were just starting a womb retreat. And Rinpoche and I was kind of pleading poverty at the time. And so I went with a tent and wanted the cheaper rate of tenting, and put my tent up in front of the bathhouse on the property. And Rinpoche gave these instructions, right? Massage this line on your foot, like sit in cross-legged, massage this line on your foot. And that was it, like to start with, like a 14-day womb retreat, you just massage your foot, you don't do anything else. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, what? Anyway, but I'm new to all of this, and I don't really like meditating, and I can't do it anyway. So I'll just do this thing that he said you do. And so I go, everybody gets sent off to their rooms, and I go to my tent, and I sit upright in my tent, like he said, and massage this line on my foot, right? When it's a womb retreat, or it's going to be whenever it starts. This doesn't really feel like anything started, by the way. And it all feels kind of a bit airy-fairy and weird, right? Because I've been a peace activist and doing all this stuff, you know, and to come into this world where you do this kind of thing. The next thing I know, I'm overcome with fear and a certainty that everybody on this property is bonkers, and I can't really trust them, and they could do something really nutty at any time, and I got to get the hell out of here and get back to Toronto. That's what I got to do. Like, this is stupid. I got to get out of here. So I do what a normal, rational, beginning meditator does. I get up, run down the driveway, run onto the Galway Road and start running back to Toronto. And I'm on the Galway Road running. Haven't made it to the 121 yet. And there's this little blue pickup. You remember the Dharma Centre used to have? And it comes chugging along. And Matthew's driving. And he pulls up alongside me and I'm running. Run, Ferris, run. And Matthew rolls down the window, leans across the passenger seat, driving quietly. No one else is on the road. Hey, Derek, what you doing? Going to Toronto. Like, oh, okay. Do you want a lift? No, I'm good. Right. You left all your stuff. Derek, you left all your stuff back at the center. Do you want to go back and get it? No, I'll come back for it later. I was like, right. He says, well, you know, Derek, it's not really good to leave a center without telling a teacher. There's like a protective kind of embrace the center's held in. The teacher knows something's not right if someone, so you really ought to tell him before you leave. You know, that's not polite. I'm like, well, tough. Center's dumb. Teacher's not helpful. That was stupid, that whole retreat. I got to go to Toronto. And he's like, well, Matthew's really smart, by the way. He goes, well, the cook just baked some banana bread, if you want some banana bread. And I'm like, banana bread? Yeah, banana bread. Banana bread would be nice. I mean, I have to go all the way. It might be nice to have some. He says, yeah, you could have some banana bread. Why don't you get in the car? I'll take you back, get some banana bread. Then I'll take you to the bus and you can go to Toronto. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go back if there's some banana bread. And so Matthew drives me back to the center and he makes me a cup of tea and some banana bread. And of course, Matthew knew that with a fight or flight mechanism, if you can take a person from flight where the bowels evacuate and the mouth dries up, and you can turn them into fight by getting them to salivate and eat, you've flipped at least the base kind of physiological response to an event. And after I'd been eating banana bread and drinking tea, I was a little bit more calm and not in such a fear-dominated state. He said, so you want to, maybe Rinpoche will be back later today and he'll be doing interviews. You can go tell him what happened and then you can leave and I'll take you to the bus station. And all of a sudden that seems now reasonable to me. It didn't seem reasonable before. So I go for my interview with Rinpoche in the afternoon. And Rinpoche says, I understand you want to leave. I said, yes, sir. He says, so what's wrong? I said, practice is stupid, doesn't work. And Rinpoche goes, oh, really? Okay, oh, what are you doing? So I'm doing that thing you said with the foot and it doesn't work, it's stupid. And I got to go back to Toronto. He says, well, no, specifically, what were you doing? I said, I was massaging the foot, like you said. No, lay it out for me. Where were you massaging? Sitting, where? In front of the bathhouse. In front of the bathhouse? He says, yeah, in my tent. Oh, okay. Well, what tent is that? There's only one tent there. Was that your one? I said, yes. He said, that flesh-colored little triangular pup tent? I go, yeah. He says, were you sitting upright? I said, yes. It's a small tent. I said, yeah, my head presses against the top of the tent when I sit in. He says, oh, okay, so you were sitting. And I'm going, yeah. Upright, pushing your head against the top of the tent. I'm going, yeah, so. He says, and the practice doesn't work? No. He says, right. And what were you looking at? I said, well, the tent was open. So you're looking at a triangle of light with your head pressed against the top of a flesh-colored tent, massaging your foot. Is that right? I said, yep. He says, and the practice doesn't work? I said, nope. He goes, really? And then the bulb goes off for me. I go, yeah, okay. We are so clueless sometimes, so clueless. Yeah. He goes, you can have an overwhelming reaction of fear to the womb experience. There's a lot of energy in that event. And You know, it's one of the most terrifying things, if not the most terrifying thing that can happen, is that initial burst of adrenaline and having to escape, you know, and the feeling of compression. So we're going to get to that later in the retreat if you stay, right? But it's okay. But maybe the practice isn't stupid and maybe it works. Yes, sir. I stayed for another, I think, 2 days and then I left. But I was very difficult to do that retreat. And years later, I came back and persisted and managed to do it. But the first time round, no, was too much. But it's really helpful to have the experience of how powerful these events can be and how we have to be very supportive and kind of cosseting for people when they're having meditation, when they're doing meditation, and not assume, and that's the thing, is not assume people aren't having the results that the practice, you should just see. And the powerful thing with Rinpoche was, and I hope with the teachers who practice and teach us now, is for people to have a faith and confidence in these practices, that they work and people are making progress, and not to disparage or diminish that. Anyhow, that's just an example of how off the beam a student can be, completely clueless. Any other complaints or criticisms? Otherwise, I think we can wrap up.
And I just mentioned before we wrap up, if people have a look at the chat, there's some information there about how you can do dana.
You can also save the chat to your computer by opening it and clicking the 3 dots at the bottom, and it'll say save chat, and then it'll save it and you'll have that information available on your laptop or device.
I'm going to close this with one thing that happened at the doorway that everyone should know. Many of you know that when Rinpoche left the temple, many things that happened at the doorway in the last seconds. And when he gave an empowerment of one of the last empowerments of Vajrayogini on his birthday, actually, he was at the doorway leaving. And I'm not going to say the mantra on this call, but many of you know it. And he gave only one mantra that day, and it was the triple mantra of Vajrayogini that has syllables 3 times generally through it. It starts with Om, Om, Om. It's the longest mantra. And he went to leave, and he turned around at the doorway and said, that mantra and the Vajrasattva mantra are the most powerful mantras, magical mantras, that the Lama uses to overcome obstacles for this Lama. And then he left. There's a longer story about why that matters, but I always feel like it's important that people know that, because I mentioned that then to 2 senior teachers who happened to be in the room at that empowerment. And one of them said, oh yeah, I've known that all along. And I thought, well, why haven't you told us? Like, if you knew that that was that powerful, you ought to tell people, right? If you have a cure for an illness, we should share it. And I'm just using this opportunity to add that at the end, because I think most people probably know that or have heard that. And it's not to emphasize, by the way, one aspect of Buddhism or Tibetan over Theravada or anything else. It's just to say that particular tool in the toolbox was one that was effective and was espoused by Rinpoche. And it's important that people who want to practice in that tradition know that, and if they have the opportunity to learn it and use it, practice with it, try it out, see if it works for them as well. Cheers.
Derek, thank you so much for sharing today.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, folks.
Thank you so much, Derek. That was really great.
Thank you, everybody. All right.
Come again.
Oh, well, thanks.
This
Yeah.
was really wonderful and brought a lot of things to life with some also good suggestions that are helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek-san.
Thanks, Rob-san.
Derek, are you teaching any regular Zoom classes right now during these lockdown period?
Yeah, we do one on YouTube.
Oh, on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah, we do one at 1:30 on Tuesdays Eastern time in YouTube. Jane and I teach that. She teaches the French portion. We do it bilingually. So we do French and English. Right now we're working with Vajrasattva and with death and dying and kind of the totality practices that are in a way they're taught by Thich Nhat Hanh and Rob McConnell. So
Can you please send us that link, Elisa or Karen? Because that's specifically what I'm really, really interested in right now.
I'll provide it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Those classes are relatively short and they're mostly focused on practice. We just do the practice together, basically. And then if there's a question or two in the chat, we try to address it. We try to keep them to about an hour, hour and 10. And then they're on YouTube later, so you can work with them anytime. You don't have to join us live.
That's perfect, yeah.
Okie doke. Let's end in the traditional way, shall we? And share the merit. Idam te punyakama aswakya motu. Idam te punyakama aswakya motu. Idam te punyakama aswakya motu. Sabbe satta sukhita hantu. May all beings be well and happy. By the power of this action, may we attain awakening. Having attained awakening, may we defeat all unwholesome states. Through the endless storms of birth, illness, old age, and death, may we help all beings to cross the oceans of suffering of the world. By the power of this action, may all our teachers be well and happy. May they abide happily, have long lives, travel safely, and spread the Dharma as vast as the sky. Sadhu, 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 sadhu. Cheers. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today.
Thanks.
Spread the love and compassion.
You bet.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Karen Meredith, for helping organize and for your comments, too.
Absolutely.
It's so nice to see you, Rob. It's the first time I'm seeing Rob in quite a while. Give him a major hug.
Rob, people are. Say hi.
Hi. Bye.
Hi.
We close the meeting now. Thank you so much, everybody. If anybody needs to
Thanks,
follow
Lisa.
up, you can send an email if you need information. If you need something from me, please email me because I'm busy, so I sometimes forget. A couple people were asking about information, so just follow up with me. I'll put my email right now in the link in the chat.
I'll remind you by email.
Thank you.
It's the one-page teaching and one-page teaching.
Yeah, the YouTube is on Try a Little Mudita. It's all one word. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the title of it. Try a Little Mudita.
It's in the chat, Eleanor, if you save it.
Yeah, if you put it all as one word, Try a Little Mudita. And there's a backlog of of our meditations together on there. Okie dokie.
Hey, bye everyone.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.